I enjoy finding games that are a little off the beaten path. One way I do this is through my Steam Discovery queue, where I find games that look interesting to me and add them to my ridiculously sized wishlist. I really enjoy it when I find games that have the overwhelmingly positive rating as well. While that's not always an indication that it'll be a new favorite game of mine, it is usually a sign that the game is going to be pretty fun. That's the situation I have with today's game, The Upturned. It's a game I found through Steam that looked interesting, was very much an indie game, and had an overwhelmingly positive Steam rating. Did that lead to a fun new game to experience, or a game that I didn't enjoy? Let's take a look. The Upturned is a 3D platformer with some survival horror elements and was developed by Zeekers. It was released in 2022 for the PC. It is $9.99 on Steam, and indie games that release on Steam don't always have a rating associated with them, but personally, I'd stick this in the very low T range. It doesn't really have any graphic content, no blood, no exceptionally violent. It's more of a cartoony kind of violence what you do get, but it does have a good share of jump scares and creepy looking monsters that wouldn't be for people who are less than that necessarily. There isn't much of a story to The Upturned. You are entering the afterlife, but it appears you entered it at just the wrong time, as you've missed a train that is whizzing in front of you. Instead of staying there and waiting for another train, you explore and find the Upturned Inn. Here you meet Ick, who tells you that you have a reservation there on floor 1434. You must then deal with a rather breakdown-prone elevator to reach your room at the inn. This may not sound like a lot of fun, but on each floor that the elevator breaks down on, you need to find a fuse to fix the elevator and continue your journey. The thing is that the floors can range from anything to a fairly standard hotel hallway, a mall, an arcade, or even an Old West town. While on your journey, you will be in contact with Ick via a two-way radio. Here you'll learn more about the inn, Ick's backstory, and even how you died. These are all of course done in a fairly comedic and wacky kind of way. So it's not an incredibly complex story, but I don't know that I really always understood what was going on, especially as we got closer to the end of the story. Like, I kind of got it, but like overall meaning was kind of eluding me. And maybe that's kind of the point. Maybe you're not really supposed to have it all nailed down. Maybe it's meant to be left a little ambiguous. Regardless, even though there isn't a lot of story to The Upturned, the conversations with Ick are so goofy and full of humor and charm that it's hard not to enjoy the ride, even if the elevator is breaking down every handful of floors. Gameplay for The Upturned is pretty simple. It's a 3D platformer at heart with some survival horror elements in the mix. As with most 3D platformers, levels will start out pretty easy and will get a bit harder, either because there are harder platforming sections, puzzles to figure out, more enemies to deal with, or harder enemies to deal with, or some combination of all these factors. Your abilities to deal with these challenges are fairly limited. You can move, jump, turn your flashlight on and off, pick up items, and throw items. Picking up and throwing items can be used to solve puzzles or to toss at enemies in order to defeat them. There are some enemies that you can never defeat in this way, so running is your only option. You can also restore health by picking up and holding medkits you can find in the level. There are also some other items that you can pick up that do special things, like a fan that will blow stuff away, magnets that will attract items, and things like that you'll find as you go along. As you're playing, be prepared for many well-placed jump scares along the way. This game isn't horror in the sense of being bloody or violent or super mature themed, but it is good at creating a tense atmosphere and bringing the jump scares. This can get pretty crazy when a room suddenly fills with enemies and you're panicking while throwing various pieces of furniture at them. It is also very much a game that you know things are going to hit the fan when you find the fuse at the end of the level. Getting back to the elevator is often a super tense and frenetic experience. There will be a good number of times you see some unfriendly faces as you get into your elevator and the doors close. Now, some may not enjoy the simple nature of the core gameplay, but personally I think it works for the game. Since the game is kind of a weird mix of platformer, horror, and furniture tossing simulation, having simple controls works for those times when you're feeling the stress and maybe wouldn't be able to remember some more elaborate move you had to do. I feel like having a simple set of controls also puts the weight more on level design and how the game makes you use those simple controls in different situations. I feel like The Upturned is pretty good at this. It not only has all kinds of weird and wacky levels, but the levels feel like they're throwing different things at you as you progress. progress. You'll need keys to unlock doors on later floors. In some floors, you'll be having to avoid water or having more difficult platforming sections. It never gets super difficult unless you are trying to collect all of the chocolates in the levels for opening bonus stages. I never did this, but it is there for those who are interested in taking the extra time and having a bit of extra challenge, both for getting the candy bars themselves, but also in those extra bonus stages. Playing through the Upturned is a simple, wacky, and tense experience. It's maybe not the most complex gameplay of all time, but it was super entertaining. And always remember, your grade at the end of the level is just random. That R you just got was not on you. The Upturned is not a great looking game. I have zero doubt though that this is very much on purpose. The style of the game kind of adds to the weird quirkiness. And I also feel like the muddled graphics also serve to set up tense atmospheres for the game so that they can set you up for some nice jump scares. I feel like it's kind of going for a retro look, but I kind of feel like this game has its own unique style that really isn't kind of trying to pull off an older game, but maybe it's just a game that I don't know about that it's trying to kind of copy that kind of style to kind of give it that feel, but I don't think so. Truthfully, it's not a style that really draws me in very much. At first, this was kind of one of the things that kept me from maybe pulling the trigger on this game. I was like, oh, the graphics seem kind of bad, but yeah, the game still manages to work with it. And even with that kind of low res style of graphics, the game presents quite a few unique floors in the game that are very interesting to explore. So it's not something that really like drew me to the game, but I also felt like it didn't really hinder my enjoyment either. The sound in the Upturned does a great job of setting the tone in the game. There are times where you hear wacky music, like when you're talking with Ick, that shows the comedic side of the game. There are times when you have frantic music as you've just run into a bunch of monsters and you're trying to defeat them or escape them. And there are times of relative silence to increase tension as you wait for something to jump out at you or some kind of thing to happen in the level you're on. There is just a good variety of music in this kind of way, and it's used really well to set the emotions that the game kind of wanting you to be experiencing at the moment. Now, it's not just the music that is used well here, I feel like these sound effects are used well to add in tension or comedic effect. Hearing Ick's call tone while you're in the middle of some tense situation can both scare you and make you kind of laugh at the same time, wondering what in the world does he want. The constant noise of your own footsteps, the eerie sound of the flashlight, and the noise of the monsters trying to get you all add to an atmosphere of the game for whatever that atmosphere is supposed to be at the moment, whether it's the big thumping noise of a giant monster kind of coming after you and you're like wanting to get out of there, or whether it's just Ick's slightly annoying but kind of amusing sound while he's talking. It's just kind of a good use of basic sounds. I didn't run into any issues in terms of performance. I thought that the beginning of the game messed up on me a little bit, but in keeping with the odd and quirky nature of the game, you will never get your name entry to quite work how you want. This is a feature, not a bug. Took me a little bit to figure that out at the beginning, so I'm just passing that on. The Upturned isn't like any game that I've played before. It's a strange mix of comedy and horror in a 3D platformer package, and it winds up working way better than you might think. While the game does have scares, it's not going to be a horror game that has blood and violence and mature themes. This is a pretty lighthearted affair that is more about jump scares and getting chased by large monsters in pajamas or evil whales. It's simple and easy to figure out, but can be a little bit more challenging as you get to later floors. You'll probably die a number of times as you're figuring things out, but I would never go as far to say that the game was difficult. It always felt very doable. The game just often had the element of surprise. And while the game is full of charm and humor in part of its story, the overall story is a bit of a weakness for me. It's just not super clear at parts, and maybe that's by design, but it just left me feeling a bit unsatisfied at the end. Given the whole package, I'm giving the Upturned a 9 out of 10. Again, The Upturned is a bit of a strange game with its mix of humor and tense horror themes. Probably not going to satisfy if you're looking for something purely horror or something that is purely a wacky good time. But the mix is interesting and great as an entry point for scary games, or if you're up for something a bit different. This is definitely the kind of game that makes going off the beaten path a lot of fun for me. I love finding those games that don't get a lot of coverage, but are super enjoyable to play. I can definitely see why this game has the rating it does on Steam, and I would also recommend giving it a try if you're up for the experience that I've described here.